everybody. Welcome to the NBS of TNP on YouTube or Spotify, the Northern Broadcasting Service of the North Pacific. Today, we're delighted to have as the first part of a multi-part series, Attempted Socialism, one of the most renowned TNPs, and has been a long-serving Chief Justice and part of the executive government for a very long time as well. If you're listening to us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're currently not a citizen of TNP, go to our website and apply for citizenship. And also, if you currently have multiple nations, don't forget to affiliate your vote assembly nation with the North Pacific. By doing so, you can be part of the most powerful voting bloc in the World Assembly. So, without further ado, Attempted Socialism. Would you like to start by giving a brief introduction of yourself and your career in the North Pacific and in nation states in general?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I was actually recruited by Hold'em around September 1st, 2022. And he asked me to come join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where I was made a deputy on September 12th, 2022. And since then, I've stayed as a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs since then, and I've served 3 terms as Justice, and I was Chief Justice for almost a year. So that's been the most of my TNP career. Before that, I have been active in NS Left and the International, but that goes back many years, and I actually can't remember exactly how I was involved back then. But that's my CV. Chief Justice is something I was quite proud of, but at this point, I think the staying power as Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is probably what people know me for the most.
But obviously, Chief Justice is a very important position in the North Pacific, as it is an elected position and one with considerable powers. So, would you like to tell us about your time as a justice when you were elected back in November, in the November 2022 judicial election, and what sort of things you worked on? I mean, I know that there are certain confidentiality requirements on the judiciary side, so you can just tell us what you can about your judicial career.
Yeah, I was elected. Well, I didn't actually expect to get elected the first time I ran. So I kind of jumped into it not very prepared. And the first case that I was when I joined the bench that we heard was the case of on the definition of treaties and delegates' authority to sanction residents. And having been in the region not very long, being the first time on the court, that was honestly a difficult case. But I also enjoyed it. We had, I won't go, I actually tried to see how much of it had been declassified. So I won't go into our internal deliberations other than to say that we had a very long back and forth on how to evaluate sanctions, whether they were against residents or people who don't have any rights of residency or citizenship. and kind of cutting that Gordian knot was fairly difficult. And we also, people who were involved back then, I think everyone knows that there was some blowback. There was a quite vehement response to the ruling, which as a relative new both citizen in the region and a very new justice at that point, that was somewhat surprising to me. Or not that there was blowback, but the degree of blowback did surprise me. I became Chief Justice in the new year on February 7th, 2023. And there were two rulings that I was quite, well, where I was the drafter and where I'm quite happy with where the rulings landed. One was on the consideration of the jurisdiction of the criminal code, where we had to, the court had to.
That's ruling number 70, right? Yeah, on the reconsideration of the jurisdiction of the criminal code in February 2023. Yeah.
Yeah. And that ruling was not in any way as controversial as the first I talked about on the treaties and sanctions. But it's quite, I think it's actually in a way it's as important, because we redefined where we could, where the court has the ability to convict someone, where you can be prosecuted for crimes against the North Pacific. That for the more, I think, consequential part was that we expanded what we kind of in online terms what we might consider North Pacific soil. So if people commit a crime on the Discord, if people commit a crime against the North Pacific through World Factbook entries or such like, that is still North Pacific soil, and it can be prosecuted if indeed someone believes a crime occurred. The last I want to highlight was very much, I think, probably the most beautiful and the one where I like the language the most, still, is on defunct rulings, where we clarified how to. The point about having a court with the power of judicial review is that rulings made by the court have the force of law, but they are not laws. And oftentimes the court is asked to review a law with some ambiguity. And if we as citizenry believe that the court actually ruled correctly, but in a way that was unintended, then you can't appeal that ruling because the ruling was fundamentally correct, but the citizenry has the power to then change the law. And the ruling on defunct rulings kind of went into how that works and laid out in very, very concrete terms what are the steps that the citizenry can take to change a ruling or on a law that the citizenry believes was showed mistakes in the law. So that's the difference between a ruling that was incorrect at the time and where the court then overrules that ruling, or as here, a ruling that was correct at the time, but where the law has since been changed, and now that ruling would no longer be correct, and thus needing a superseding ruling. And the work with that was, I think, some of the most fun with the legal stuff in TNP that I've had. And the quite expansive nature of the ruling tied into several other rulings by requests for review by Trump's Crano, who was court examiner. He was court examiner at the time, and
Still is.
Still is. Okay. He had several requests for review that all kind of were old rulings that needed some kind of update or were wrongfully decided. So getting this one ruling out first was quite a bit of work, and it's probably the one that I'm most proud of in terms of quality of that work.
Right. So, because I think during your term as Chief Justice, there were a large number of rulings. There was on the Funk ruling 72, as you mentioned. Also pretty much new rulings on advisory opinions on the ambiguity in the absence of the audited roles for government bodies and so forth. And then there was a spate of rulings in August of 2023 as well. So could you tell us a bit, on how you worked on the court process? I mean, like, subject to confidentiality, of course. How you worked on the court process and how you discussed and debated the various rulings.
Yeah. I'm perfectly perfectly aware. And of course, when the rulings in August of 2023, there's a 1 year declassification statute. So they're not declassified yet, and thus confidentiality is something that I'll be very mindful of here. But the court, in many ways, is like the personalities of the justices means a lot. So the time I've been on the court has had an emphasis on consensus, which means that we kind of get a feel of, okay, we take a request for review, then we open the floor for legal briefs that they get in, and then the question comes, okay, where do we land initially? Can we agree at the onset? So, for instance, and one that is declassified was on the regional ban of Siberia Union. That was decided within, some of the first posts when we closed the time for submitting legal briefs, because it was not a close run thing. It was not something we really had to go over. But some of the others on defunct rulings, we kind of were in broad agreement, but there was a lot of the technicalities that we wanted to really, we had to go through a lot of stuff to get the language right. we couldn't. It's difficult when you have a very substantial ruling to just churn it out because we agree on the broader strokes, then get it produced and get it published. That's not how it goes, even if there is a broad consensus. And of course, if it's a controversial thing, then it can really drag out, because at that point, if you're still trying to achieve consensus, then there is a substantial amount of negotiating on the issues, or trying to seeing what arguments work between the justices, because if an argument can convince the other justices, then it's probably the right decision. And so that those decisions in August, I think, were largely we were in broad consensus, but there was a lot of work to get the languages right in all of those decisions, and some of them tied back into the others. And I think if you go into the some of the decisions that were decided cite back to, for instance, on defunct rulings, because we wanted to get the language right and then apply it to the other decisions that we were asked to resolve. So it's not for nothing that on defunct rulings is really the one I'm the happiest with of my tenure, and it's both because of the work that went into it, and I think the quality of the work. And the bench at that time, we collaborated quite well. We had a good working relationship.
Right. I think we will take a break here. Thank you so much, Attempted Socialism, for joining us on the Northern Broadcasting service of the North Pacific on YouTube or Spotify today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please don't forget to subscribe. Join us on the next episode of TMP NBS, where we will continue our discussions with Attempted Socialism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.